even under more massive threat. But of course, innovation is the key to survive for any business. How have you innovated through the times of the pandemic? How has digitization helped you? What is your strategy now?
So to your earlier question, which is about the strategy going into COVID and post-COVID, so we have to be cognizant of the fact that the food services market will see a radical transformation in the post-COVID era. And only those players who have worked out a clear strategy anchored on using technology to enhance safety and not just make the customer experience easier, only they will survive. Because to make the customer experience easier is a relatively simple task. But to provide a platform which can be used to enhance safety, both in terms of delivery of the product, but as well as in terms of cooking. Like you rightly said, there is no correlation that has been established between transmission of the virus and food. But there is contact that happens in the process when somebody is handing it over, when somebody is picking it. And that's where the role of technology comes in. And that's where we've made, big investments in building a tech platform that uses intelligence to be able to sequence production. And let's say there's a cafeteria in which 100 people can sit. In the post-COVID world, you probably have a sixth of that, which means 15 people keeping 6 feet distance. Now, this platform will then enable production to match that capacity so that you don't have crowding anymore. People are not jostling with one another to pick up the food. And it doesn't matter whether Elior is serving it or anybody else is serving it. These will be must-haves for any corporate cafeteria. So that's the kind of investment. And that's
Sanjay, then my concern is, of course, I understand how technology and digitization is now helping. And I want to understand in terms of pattern, what are corporate houses then looking at? Packaged food, of course, I understand is going to be the most wanted at this time. How are you reworking your menus? Because these are large kitchens that used to be catering to many organizations. How are your kitchens revamping and reworking themselves? How is your menu in terms of what you're offering today? Has that now been limited in terms of what you can offer in terms of 100% safety and surety today?
So there are two ways I can answer that question in terms of what's changing as far as food habits are concerned in the post-COVID world. Two things are changing primarily. One, that there will of course be focus on packed food. You rightly said so. But what's also going to be important is the safety processes that you follow in the manufacturing of the food itself, or the cooking of the food, so to speak. And that's where you're going to see a lot of intervention. And that's why some of the smaller players are going to struggle, because classically, if you see, this industry never has working capital support. No matter what monetary policy changes come about, you will not see credit flowing into the food services business anywhere in the country. So in the absence of, credit, making those investments to become compliant to ensure safety is going to be a struggle for the smaller players. And that's going to be the biggest challenge when the industry recovers, that whilst menus will change, expectations from customers will change, per person consumption will come down because the menus will change and it will be packed food. The ability to deliver that solution will be linked to your capacity to absorb newer ways of production, newer ways of delivery, and having technology platforms that can enable both.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, because of course your expectations will change, but you also need to understand the kind of liquidity that is in the system for the businesses to today sustain and survive themselves as well. Great insights there, Sanjay. I'm afraid I'm completely out of time, but good to have you on the show to really understand what's happening in this one very important sector that usually gets left out of many conversations. With that, I'm completely out of time on this special broadcast, slipping into a very short break. News and updates continue on the other side.
You're watching India Ahead.
You have seen him over the last 20 years. biggest stories of our times brought into your living rooms by him. Now, as India strives to come out of COVID impact, Bhupendra Chaubey is back in an all-new avatar. No multi-window meaningless debates, but multi-angled scrutiny of data. No uninformed opinion, but data-driven solutions. From politics to economy, from entertainment to your money. News that you should know, reaching you wherever you are. From your mobile phones to your TV screens to your social streams. Not just a TV show, but a multi-platform citizen's voice. Talk to Bhupen, weeknights at 8. Kaun hu main? All of us are forever trying to seek an answer for this question, but somehow get lost in the loud noises around us. Kaun, ke, yaru, yavaru. In many languages, it means the same thing. Who are we? Even as I try to seek an answer to that, I'm sure who I am not. Not fixated with news which becomes gossip in a few hours. Certainly not someone who only trains her eyes on the big metros. Certainly not someone who ignores you just because you speak English in a particular fashion. English, Telugu, Hindi, Tamil and Bengali. I am all of that. I read you. The time is now. Let's take India ahead.
You're watching India Ahead.
Good evening. What should be the big language of India? Are we in a position in which there should be one unified language for the entire country? After the new education policy, which has now been brought out by the central government, there is a roaring debate between south of India and north of India, whether an attempt is being made somehow to create a scenario where one size fits all kind of an environment is being created by the center. We've seen all kinds of positions being taken by key stakeholders since this new education policy was released. The Tamil Nadu Chief Minister now has taken to Twitter, and the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, Mr. Palaniswamy, is making it absolutely clear that he is not going to allow this three-language phenomenon in the state of Tamil Nadu. Where does that leave Tamil Nadu as a state? Where does this leave the basic dilemma which often has been spoken about whether central governments have often attempted to impose Hindi in southern states? How real is that fear which is being expressed? And just why would the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister think in terms of expressing this point so clearly that he is not in favor of this three-language formula? Well, we got three special guests joining us right now. Madhuvanti ji is State Executive Committee member of the BJP in Tamil Nadu. Kovai Satyan is the spokesperson of AIADMK. And V. Premashankar is the co-founder of the Lead. As you all know, on this channel, ladies and gentlemen, we want to bridge the gap between the North and the South. We don't want to spend time only looking at trivialities which often emerge from northern parts of India and only focus ourselves on what's happening between UP and Bihar. I myself come from UP. But that aside, this issue that we picked up, I think, is at the core of a certain regional insecurity which seems to exist. So let me begin with you, Premashankarji. Do you think that this position which is being taken by the Chief Minister of the state, does this position somehow echo an insecurity which exists in large parts of Dravidian territory, or do you believe that really there is some genuine attempt, maybe a serious attempt which is being made by the BJP-led government at the center to impose Hindi even in southern states?
Very big problem for journalists themselves. And thank you so much for starting off the debate with that point that you mentioned. Very happy to hear that. To come to your question about insecurity, I think it is a political necessity, first of all. For the DMK, which has, for the Dravidian parties, which has formed its basis on the basis of Tamil as a language, which is one of the most prominent aspects on which the Dravidian policies and Dravidian ideology stands on. It is impossible to even think of allowing anything closer like a third language, be it officially or be it, even if it is being said that it is not necessarily going to be Hindi, it is impossible for the Dravidian parties to accept. And like it was expected, both the DMK and the AIDMK are seldom seen on the same platform, but on this they are. They definitely are on the same platform, where they say that, where the Chief Minister has come out and said that he agrees with the opposition there, and he will not allow the three-language policy to come into Tamil Nadu. And hours later, we see the opposition leader M.K. Stalin thanking the Chief Minister for taking that stand. Now, these are uncommon on other issues, but this is very common on the issue of language. So more than insecurity, I would say it's a political necessity, and there is no way.
Why is it? But why? But look at the specifics of the case. Look at the specifics of the case in terms of what's happening. What is happening right now is a scenario which, frankly, has been debated on earlier occasions as well. It's a scenario, it's a dilemma which has been confronted on earlier occasions as well, where this feeling existed. When I look at this new education policy, why should this sentiment exist? That somewhere there is some tinkering which is going on with the Dravidian political entity, or should I say a Dravidian literature come Dravidian political ecosystem which exists. Why should this feeling exist in the very first place, that this new education policy is an attempt somehow to erode this sentiment?
See, Bhupen, after a lot of deliberations, we've seen the anti-Hindi imposition protests in the 1960s. DMK came to power on the basis of this anti-Hindi imposition protest, massive protests across the state. What was their biggest thing? That you cannot impose Hindi onto the state. And any measure, the moment, and after a lot of deliberations did we arrive at a position where only two languages, which is English as a linked language, and Tamil, which will be the official language for the state. And only these two languages can be discussed in terms of the academia. And the moment you say a third language, it is almost like calling it a third front, in the political parlance. Academically, the moment you say a third language is anywhere in the horizon, it will be vehemently opposed. So the only acceptance here is a two-language policy, where English is the linked language and Tamil is the official language for the state.
Okay. Madhuvanti ji, how does the BJP at the state level, the BJP at the central level, we know what the position is. How does the BJP at the state level then, counter this position which is coming up, where the principal opposition party and the party in power, both of them appear to be echoing the same sentiment, that your party somehow is trying to change the political or the literate ecosystem which exists within the state of Tamil Nadu?
See, I first would like to mention that we go with the national education policy that has been brought out by the party and by the government at the center. We support that. Secondly, I would like to begin. These are my strong but humble opinions. Secondly, I would like to mention here that in Tamil Nadu, every single CBSE or ICSE school that is affiliated to the central government has been studying 3 languages all these days, all these years. I've studied 3rd language, I've studied 2nd language in my school. And I'm sure all these so-called leaders who are promoting only English and then Tamil as a language in Tamil Nadu did not admit their children in state board schools. All their children studied in central board schools. They have schools that they run affiliated to the CBSE where 3rd language is a very common occurrence. So I don't see where suddenly this whole problem of bringing in the 3rd language and opposing it and questioning it and making statements saying we are saddened and upset to know about it exists.
I'll tell you the problem. Madhuvanti, I'll tell you what the problem is. You know, I've asked this question to myself. I mean, I deeply regret the fact that I come from UP, I come from Banaras, and I can't read, you know, famous poets like Thiruvalluvar. I can't read or get the sentiment of what famous Tamil writers, authors, poets may well have wanted to convey. I may have read Premchand, you know, I may have read great Hindi writers and poets, Suryakant Tripathi Nirala, and a whole range. But it is my deep regret. Don't you think that the same point that you're making, that there has never been such a fear which exists in Tamil Nadu, it could well be countered.
My point is it's
it
the
could
same
well
thing.
be countered to say
Why
that why don't you ask students in North India? Why don't you ask students in Banaras? Why don't you ask students in Allahabad then also to be open to the idea of learning this language in South of India?
Exactly. So what is the problem in allowing the students in the south of India to learn this language called Hindi? It's the same thing. Why should we be
that doesn't happen north of India.
So
because it doesn't happen north of India. North of India, you want to stay with Hindi. Now, south of India, you are trying to push Hindi, which is where the opposition is coming from.
Nobody is pushing anything. I'm very sorry. Nobody is pushing anything. Nobody is trying to impose anything on anybody. I beg to very strongly differ here. And the national education policy is very clearly saying, please study a 3rd language of your choice. Nobody has said you have to study Hindi only. I can feel the same thing that you feel, that if you were not able to study Thiruvalluvar, I have not been able to study your Hindi poets. I'm talking about students who probably studied in state board schools. Not me, but I'm saying. So what is the issue here? Is the problem that if you study Hindi, the people in Tamil Nadu will start understanding Man Ki Baat, which means there will be a more nationalistic ideology, and then this whole Dravidian Tamil business is going to get affected? Is that the problem?
Kovai? Let's get the AIDMK then on this one. Kovaiji, is it what? Is it about a fear that people in Tamil Nadu will start listening to Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat, which is an address delivered in Hindi, and therefore these people may start getting attracted to Prime Minister Modi, and it could lead to a threat to this political regime which seems to move only between DMK and the AIADMK? Is that the reason why both parties are opposing this new education policy?
Bhupen, thanks for having me here, and I welcome Madhuvanti to the frontline politics. I presume that this is probably one of her maiden debate in channels. Just to have some factual corrections to Madhuvanti, Man Ki Baat is telecast in Tamil, not in Hindi. So there is no fear of understanding what one speaks. So the question here is, there is a saying that history repeats. And we are back to what happened in 1968 when the first national education policy was drafted, when there was a fierce debate in the parliament wherein our founder, Annadurai, made this statement. What should be the yardstick for a language to be called as a national language? Then when the opposition said that it is based on the people, number of people who speak it, so the Hindi are majoritarily spoken by people of India, then he said then the national badge should be crow, not peacock. Why did you choose peacock? Because there is elegance, there is something to it, there is a tradition to it. Then crow should be the national bird for India, not peacock. Then every opposition understood what we are trying to say. There is a culture, there is a heritage, there is sentiments, there is rights, and everything is attached to language. And I want to correct Madhuvanti, ma'am, the language Tamil is not a business. It is life for us. So I would stand, please correct your statement saying that we are not here doing business on language. And what we are trying to say is, when there is nothing stopping a person to learn a 3rd language as per your statement, I'll give you a data. In Tamil Nadu, 3,65,000 students learn Hindi through Dakshina Bharata Hindi Prachar Sabha. The government has never stopped them, nor the government had said anything to anybody, please don't learn a 3rd language to acquire knowledge. But the question here is, why should there has to be a mention of a third language policy in the draft itself. Today, it's something like old wine in the new bottle, and tomorrow there could be a backdoor entry and say that it is mandatory. And sitting here
but
as a representative of BJP,
Kovai, you know what?
Madhuvanti
What Madhuvanti ji is saying. I'll tell you. Look at the discourse. And I know Madhuvanti ji wants to come in, but before I go back to her, look at the discourse which has been unfolding in Tamil Nadu the last couple of weeks. There are so many, let me say, right-wing authors or right-wing political activists who are all taking this position that there is a fundamental flaw with Tamil political analysis. And that fundamental flaw is that there is not enough dosage of nationalism which has been incorporated in Tamil political discourse. Whether it is, let's say, Tamil media, whether it's Tamil politics, do you get this sense that maybe this insistence on this three-language formula, which by the way has been opposed right from C.N. Annadurai's time, do you think that the reason why this insistence is being done is because the BJP now is keen to somehow inject a certain dosage of nationalism within the Tamil political ecosystem?
Nobody needs to tell us how nationalism has to be displayed or portrayed. And perhaps Tamil Nadu is one such state wherein the highest amount of contribution towards freedom fight movements and even the poets like Bharatiya, which has been sung across Tamil Nadu, has fueled the patriotic fire in the people's mind. So we definitely don't need lessons or anybody or whatsoever it is, particularly talking about fueling nationalism through the language, which actually has set an example in the past. Now my question here is, if you say that this language is optional, if you say that it is lukewarm, either you have a choice to do it, you don't have a choice to do it, then what is the point in having it here? When there is already a couple of private schools, a majority of the private schools teaching the third language, and when I have an act,
then why this insistence, Madhuvanti ji?
Then the point is, then why should you have it in the first place then?
So is the insecurity on your part, Madhuvanti ji? Is the insecurity on your part, Madhuvanti ji? Are you trying in the garb of pushing this three-language new education policy in Tamil Nadu, in southern states, which as I said has been opposed not since now, right since the last 4 decades, and which is where the entire linguistic politics debate comes into place. Are you worried that the only region in India where the BJP cannot grow is southern parts of Vindhya? And the reason why southern parts of Vindhya maybe the BJP is not growing is because there is an absence of Hindi. So is that the real problem then?
No, there is no such problem. I don't think we should be creating problems where there are none. And to correct Kovai Satyan sir, Man Ki Baat is dubbed in Tamil. The Prime Minister of the country does not speak it in Tamil. He speaks it only in Hindi. So I just want to make that little correction there to Kovai Satyan sir.
Maybe it gets dubbed.
Thank you so much.
Maybe it gets dubbed. It's the Prime Minister's address.
I would also like to tell you very categorically that I speak the language, I say Tamil. I don't say Tamil. And I don't speak the language in a very different or a wrong way. I come from a family of actors who've been speaking this language for a livelihood here for past 3 generations, and we know what the Tamil identity, culture and ideology is. So just because we say we'd like to learn Hindi, that doesn't mean that we are losing identity or losing culture or losing anything in this state. I'm sorry, I beg to differ.
Why this insecurity? I'm with the question of insecurity.
No,
then why oppose it? Then why oppose it, Kovai? Then why not accept it? Why not accept it? Maybe something which was acceptable to Annadurai way back in the 60s. Why should you stay with that story in 2020 as well?
About the peacock. Give me an answer to what is the problem if another language is introduced.
Kovai. Let's hear Kovai.
So I go with your first statement. Let me correct Madhuvanti, ma'am. You said that the private schools are teaching. I gave you data how many people graduate from Dakshina Bharati Hindi Prachar Sabha when it's already there in existence. Have you noticed any apprehension or opposition from the government side stopping students to learn? We have not done it. But my point is, not at the cost of my language, not at the cost of my mother language. When you want to impose something through backdoors, wherein in future you want all your communication through that medium, not at the cost of the language which I grew up, not at the cost of my language where I acquired knowledge, not at the cost of anything else which is close to my heart. Now, this is not something which can be termed as, just by learning Hindi, somebody will learn culture or language. We are open to it. But the point is, don't try to impose. Don't use a backdoor entry.
I'm trying to direct this debate really to the crux of the question. Prem Shankar ji, is the crux of the question just this, that the BJP believes between Tamil Nadu, between Karnataka, where the BJP, by the way, has a government, between Kerala, between Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, what is really missing is a hard emphasis on nationalism. You know, these are all states which take great pride in their linguistic prides and their linguistic cultures. Is that insecurity question which I was raising, is this opposition to this three-language formula largely coming because both the DMK and the AIADMK may believe that if this becomes a success, if this is lapped up by people, then maybe it has potential of completely altering the political ecosystem. Is that the reality?
I don't think that the discussion is going that far where you're taking it, Bhupen. I don't think it is. The thought process is going to the lengths to which the way you have placed the bar. I think the question about three-language policy is very simple. It is who is going to. I mean, is the DMK, just for a second, imagine if the DMK was in power in the state. How vehemently would they oppose it? Now, when AIADMK is in power, it becomes a necessity. It becomes a political necessity for them to oppose this particular point. Let's not forget the national education policy. Most of its aspects have been mostly welcome. They have welcomed most of the other things. Where is it getting stuck? It's getting stuck only
barring
in
this
three-language policy.
Barring the three, that's what. Barring the three-language, but that's why I'm saying. Why is it getting stuck? It's getting stuck because this is at the root of the problem. It is at the entire root of the political ecosystem in Tamil Nadu, swinging between the DIMK and the AIADMK, remaining part and parcel of Dravidian politics. Dravidian political parties is exactly this, no? The BJP managed to increase its vote share in the 2014 Lok Sabha elections, and they thought that they will be able to make gains, but look at where the BJP is today at the end of the day in Tamil Nadu.
See, Bhupen, if you look at how BJP has been trying to make inroads, look at Kerala for instance. It had tried to make its inroad through the Sabrimala issue. It was not through the language issue, although language is an important factor there also. But the issues that are trying, with which the BJP is trying to enter is largely more than language. It is about issues that can give them the leverage to get their foothold. Language is something that cannot be played around with in Tamil Nadu. There is a solid footing. You're talking about 5 decades of political platform built on this idea of the Tamil language. It's a very strong and real thing. That you cannot have a second thought to it. There is no way that you can say that any party, even if it is a constructive idea to bring in a third language as an option, it is only going to be looked at as a backdoor entry to bring in to impose Hindi, and that basically shakes up the entire platform with which the Dravidian movement was built on. 1960 anti-Hindi agitation, which brought the DMK to power and got Congress out of power, was completely riding on the back of Tamil.
Okay. Let's leave it there. Madhuvantri ji, Kovai and Prem Shankar, thank you so much for joining us. I assure you that what you have seen today is going to be an attempt on India Ahead on a daily basis. We don't want to get stuck in this kind of divide which exists between the North and the South. And I think this opposition, which is coming from Tamil Nadu to this three-language debate, is a great example of what really needs to be done to bridge this divide between the North and the South. The South, by the way, every time I say South, it's not a homogeneous territory. I'm aware of that. To all our viewers across different states, south of India's, rest assured, we want to be your voice. Rest assured, we want to raise your voice. We want to ensure that your voice is taken as seriously in the corridors of power in Delhi as is the voice of UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's do a short break. When we come back, we'll get to the other big debate.
You're watching India Ahead.
In our continuous attempts to try and talk about stories from southern states of our friends and well-wishers, our viewers from south of India whose stories just don't appear to make it anywhere in the national so-called mainstream press, our attempt is to talk about those stories. Now, this story, which is unfolding as we speak in Andhra Pradesh, is a story which I think has ominous potential of completely changing the contours of politics in the state of Andhra Pradesh. This is what's happening. First, there was Telugu star Chiranjeevi, who met the newly crowned Andhra Pradesh BJP chief. Now, Pawan Kalyan has also met him of the Jan Sena. The Pawan Kalyan Jan Sena has been in alliance with the BJP in the past, with Chiranjeevi also going and calling on the newly elected BJP president, the newly appointed BJP president, do we sense that there is something cooking, there is something changing in the political cauldron, in the political pot of the state of Andhra Pradesh? It's a state which has seen Jagan Mohan Reddy completely changing the game between the Congress and the TDP at one stage. Now it's the YSRCP versus the TDP. If it's YSRCP versus the TDP, then where do all these other big stars, where do they fall in? Is it that the BJP is hoping to maybe create a new face structure for itself, get hold of a new setup for itself, which will enable them maybe to construct a new political paradigm, a new political narrative for themselves in the state of Andhra Pradesh? Is a change possible? Is the emergence of a third front, so to say, in the state of Andhra Pradesh really possible, given the fact that there are two well-entrenched players in that state? Let's put that question to Dr. Mehboob Sheikh, who from the YSRCP, who's joining us live right now. Bala Subramaniam ji is from the TDP, and Nagesh Kumar is a senior journalist live with us as well. Bala Subramaniam ji, let me begin with you, sir. As a TDP leader, how do you respond to this spate of meetings which is taking place between the BJP chief and Pawan Kalyan and others?
Yeah, very good evening. So firstly, if you see the history or for the past 10 or 12 years, Chiranjeevi being, he is a person, I think he is the only actor in India who has utilized his stardom to the extent, because he has formed a new party called Prajarajyam way back in 2009, stating, telling that, he will be fighting for the cause of the Telugu people. He will be fighting for the rights of the Telugu people. But surprisingly, after losing the elections in 2009, in a very short period, he has merged his party in Congress for his own benefits. So he is a person, who is very selfish, and who really works for his own. So he is not bothered about the people, because if you see, after Congress lost in 2014, he distanced himself from Congress. So now, in a very recent past, during this COVID time, when he went all the way from Hyderabad to Vijayawada to meet the Honorable Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, not for the sake of the people. He went along with the other fraternity people just for asking the lands or some other things which would benefit them. So even then, even when he was in Vijayawada, the farmers who are agitating for the past 350 days approached him for his support. But he never stopped his car, nor met those people, or nor extended his support to those people. So now BJP, who are over there in Andhra Pradesh, are trying to build up in their roots in Andhra Pradesh. So in this juncture, now the Kapu community, which holds a very good percentage of vote bank in Andhra Pradesh, who are where we can call them a deciding factor for the winning most of the seats in Andhra Pradesh. So when Chiranjeevi being from the Kapu community, they are I think BJP is trying to take him into their party, and
that's what I'm trying to understand. That's what I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand whether the BJP, which has got itself a new president, there was Sunil Deodhar earlier from the BJP who was asked to manage the BJP's expansion in this state. They've got a new president. This new president now trying to, work out some arrangement between Pawan Kalyan and Chiranjeevi. If you bring in these two big stars, you get into alliance with the BJP. Does it complicate things for the TDP? That's what I'm trying to understand. Nagesh Kumar is there as well. Let me just hear from Nagesh ji and Mr. Subramanian. I'll come back to you. Nagesh, the examples which I'm giving and the scenario that I'm looking at, Nagesh, is this a believable scenario? Chiranjeevi and Pawan Kalyan, they've flirted with all sides. I mean, particularly Pawan Kalyan, from left, right, back to the right, left, right. How does one look at the spate of these meetings which are taking place today?
You see, Chiranjeevi is a retired politician, and Pawan Kalyan is a semi-retired politician, in the sense that though he is playing his political game in Andhra, most of the time he spends in Telangana. Number one. Number two, In Andhra, very unfortunately, it is the caste factor that influences the voter preference. So that way, the Kapus who constitute somewhere between 22 to 23% or maybe a little more, they are a big factor in the elections. But they have never enjoyed power. It has always been divided between the Reddis and the Kamas. Now, what the TDP has failed to do is to mobilize the people against Jagannath Reddy on this issue of shifting the capital from Amravati, that is between Vijayawada and Guntur, to Visakhapatnam. So now the BJP is playing a very cynical game of running with the hare and hunting with the hounds. I'll tell you how. The central BJP has made it very clear, both in Parliament and through its official spokespersons, that is GVL Narasimha Rao, that the central government has nothing to do with deciding the state capitals. It is totally within the purview of the state governments. So capital, they have nothing to do. But the state unit, it has got some stake in this capital issue because the public, they do not want this capital to be shifted. So they are fighting against the Jagannath Reddy government, whereas the center is acting as sort of a guardian angel of the Jagannath Reddy government. So now the long-term plan, as I see it, appears to be like this. They want to hang on to the coattails of Jagannath Reddy for the time being. So in this game, they are having a difficulty with Pawan Kalyan because Pawan Kalyan has not dished the capital issue like the BJP has done. Pawan Kalyan would like the capital to be located in Amravati. So now what the BJP is doing by meeting both Chiranjeevi and Pawan Kalyan is they are playing a long-term game. The long-term game being like this. They want the BJP...
But how? That's what I'm trying to understand. No, you hit the hammer on the nail. Nagesh, that's what I'm trying to understand. And it's a very good point that you're making. That on one hand, you have this specter of a friend relation between Jagan Mohan Reddy and Prime Minister Modi. Even on the new education policy, on various other issues, Jagan Mohan Reddy never misses a chance to praise the Prime Minister. Now here is the BJP which gets itself a new president, and that new president now trying to create a new face for the BJP by getting hold of both these two mega Telugu superstars. Does it in any way have potential of positioning the BJP in alliance maybe with Jan Kalyan and Chiranjeevi? Does it in any way complicate things for the TDP?
It does complicate things for the TDP because what the BJP is trying is to marginalize the TDP and then fill that vacuum that it is trying to create. But for the time being, as per the instructions of the Congress High Command, they want to support the Jagannath Reddy government because the BJP is still 6 seats short of majority in the Rajya Sabha. So they cannot afford to displease Jagannath Reddy. So that is what
I hear from you that ultimately